Boy, this has been a very interesting week, to say the least. And for those of you who are unaware, let me give you guys a quick recap and rundown of everything that's been happening over the past couple of months in pro wrestling, culminating in this weekend/week. A story broke a couple of months ago, maybe a month ago, where Vincent Kennedy McMahon, the CEO and chairman of World Wrestling Entertainment, was accused of paying millions of dollars in hush money to multiple women to cover up sexual assault, sexual harassment allegations pertaining to multiple women who worked for World Wrestling Entertainment. The names of those women have not come out yet. Vincent McMahon as well as John Laurinaitis were both accused in this sex scandal. In response to this, John Laurinaitis, the head of talent relations, received, I believe, an indefinite suspension, or I believe like a leave of absence, something along those lines. And this past weekend, at the age of 77, Vincent Kennedy McMahon has retired from World Wrestling Entertainment in light of these allegations. There was an investigation going on, but before the investigation concluded, Vincent Kennedy McMahon retired. In response to this, Stephanie McMahon, the daughter of Vincent Kennedy McMahon, along with Nick Khan, who was formerly the president of WWE, have both been named co-CEOs of World Wrestling Entertainment. Triple H has returned to his role as far as the EVP of talent, and he is also now the head of creative. Which essentially was Vincent Kennedy McMahon's day-to-day job. He was the head of creative. He was in charge of everything pertaining to the creative product that was put on Monday Night Raw, SmackDown. He even had a little bit of influence, especially with the new NXT 2.0. Now, this is major. This is insane. And it has culminated what is allegedly and what most considered probably one of the most wildest years in professional wrestling, and it's only July. And we'll get into all of these creative discussions pertaining to what this means for the future of WWE, what this means for Vincent McMahon, what this means for Steph, what this means for Triple H, what this means for Nick Khan. But I just wanted to kind of tap into just a little bit and briefly of how there's so many takeaways from this. And I feel like we should take a minute before we explore the wrestling related issues to dissect these very, very basic life lessons. So let's start here. Number one, wrestling fans, we don't know everything. We don't know everything. And I think that this was a perfect example of sometimes we need to just chill off and back off a little bit, because we can't speak from this place of authority if we don't know as much as we claim to know. I don't think that anybody really expected this. Anybody really expected this type of scandal to blow out in this way. And we didn't expect for Vincent McMahon's career to end in the way that it did. So I think that's the first lesson. The second lesson is that a lack of integrity is expensive. Now, allegedly, there were $14.6 million in expenses from 2006 to 2022. It is assumed that those expenses are tied to the hush money. These are all expenses coming from WWE. They filed a SEC report, I believe, earlier today, saying that they have $14.6 million of expenses that they couldn't really account for. But just to put that in perspective for you, the Impact Wrestling library allegedly was valued at $1 million. Now, WWE is a profitable company. It has always been a profitable company. These past 2 years, I believe, have been the most profitable that they have ever been. But you could have kept that $14.6 million over the past 16 years. That could have paid for somebody's salary. That could have paid for acquiring another wrestling-related property. But no, because this money was going towards these things, it now puts the company in a position where they may or may not be able to do so, or they're less inclined to do so. I feel like that's the better term because WWE has money out the wazoo. But yet, $14.6 million all tied to a series of cases that were rooted in a lack of integrity. And I think that that says a lot. Now, another thing that I pulled from this is that a leader becomes a disaster when he is the company's biggest liability. As a leader, one of the things that I learned as a child from growing up in a church is that everything rises and falls on leadership. And as a leader, you need to be the biggest, if not one of the company's biggest assets. And it becomes a disaster when you are the thing that is holding the company back as opposed to pushing it forward. We have heard multiple reports outside of this particular case that Vincent McMahon and his creative stronghold over the WWE product is one of the reasons why we saw a lot of talents leave World Wrestling Entertainment. Guys like Jon Moxley, guys like Bryan Danielson, women like Sasha Banks and Naomi. These are all people that have made money for WWE and have made money for Vince McMahon. But because he was the company's biggest liability, he drove those talents and so many others away. And I think that that's another thing that we have to consider is that in our own personal lives, are we adding value or are we being a liability to the things around us? What are we pushing away that can add value to us? And I think that this case definitely sheds light on that. And another thing that I learned is that everything is intentional. Ladies and gentlemen, let's not get it confused here. Two CEOs being named and a new head of creative being appointed when you're about to do a show in the biggest market in the United States of America is not by accident. Putting someone in charge of creative when 20 years ago, they were in that building making one of the best comebacks in the history of WWE. I'm talking about Triple H here. If you don't know, read it up. Him making his return to the Garden 20 years later as the head of creative when he was just on the sidelines for a certain amount of months is not by accident. Stephanie McMahon going from being on a leave of absence from a company to being the co-CEO is not by accident. Ladies and gentlemen, things are being done behind the scenes to put things in place because changes of power happen over time. None of this is overnight. None of this is overnight. Everything is planned. And lastly, one of the biggest things that I pulled from this is that patience is a virtue. One of the biggest stories from this past weekend in professional wrestling is that Cesaro won his first world championship. Shout outs to Cesaro. Sorry, my words. His name is Claudio. I can't pronounce his last name. I'm still trying to get a hang of that. But this is the thing that popped into my mind as soon as I saw the news about Vince. What if Cesaro waited a little bit longer? Before signing with AEW, before possibly doing stuff for ROH, what if he just waited just a little bit longer? Because I'm pretty sure that Cesaro being in your company, being led by Triple H is a night and day's difference than being under the creative climate of Vince McMahon. And now this also raises a certain amount of other questions. Like, what's next? Will Sasha Banks and Naomi come back? I think so. Because I think that they will much rather be under Triple H's leadership than Vince McMahon. Will Paige come back? Because her contract just expired. And I think, maybe she did or she didn't want to go back to WWE because of the lack of creative control. But does that change now? We don't know. Will we see Johnny Gargano back in the WWE ring? Because remember, he left. Oh, he's about to have a kid, but he should go to AEW. Yeah, that's what he needs to do. He needs to go to All Elite Wrestling. And that's what happens with a lot of these talents is You know, they leave because they don't have creative control, and then we say that they need to go to AEW or Ring of Honor. But now this begs the question. Now that Hunter's in control, are we going to see Gargano in the WWE ring again? Will we see Adam Cole return to WWE? We don't know. The future is uncertain. But what we do know is that Culture 316 is officially back. And we will be the voice of this new era of professional wrestling that's pro-acceptance, pro-equality, pro-diversity, and pro-accountability. We back, bitch.